it's a cool job for me. It fits my personality well because it's fundamentally about problem solving. You get to kind of use your brain in different and creative ways, and you get to use math in different and creative ways. And solve problems for companies. It's sometimes I think finance is seen as like the traffic cop of a company, and often I don't think it's so much that, but it is a little bit more a direction finder and a path finder, and I can just helping people point in the right direction and go to the right things and all that. So I get a rush out of that when I can kind of help a better decision be made, or when I can take something really complicated that people can't quite understand, and put together some visualization of it that then, oh, now it makes sense. Now we can talk about it intelligently, that kind of thing. So that's what I like about finance, just the fact that you are helping organizations and companies be better at what they are. If you're working a finance job at a big company or any kind of company, I think there's really three elements to it, and your job can focus more or less on one of these three, or maybe all three for either three. And also, like, different personalities are better suited for different elements of it too. So it's not a one size fits all job for sure. The first element is this whole idea of just reporting and kind of backwards looking, kind of creating the dashboard of the company so that people can tell how much did we spend, how much revenue did we bring in, what's growing, what's shrinking, and all sorts of stuff like that. I kind of put all of accounting in that same sort of bucket. Accounting is kind of doing all that financial reporting following this very strict and standard set of rules. But really it's any kind of dashboards, even there's a lot of business intelligence, insights, data science, that kind of stuff that companies do. I put almost all that stuff in the same bucket because it's really about using the numbers of a company to help understand what's going on, which then hopefully makes everybody smarter for future decisions and that sort of thing. So that's bucket number one, that kind of backwards looking reporting. I'd say bucket number two is kind of strategy and planning. So in that one, you're talking about the future. So sort of by definition, you don't have any data to work with. You're trying to use the past to predict the future, but it's much, much more kind of speculative, and it's a lot more modeling, and you're making assumptions and you're documenting those assumptions and like, okay, why do those assumptions make sense? And, and how does that feed decision making going forward? It also just kind of, almost every kind of big company has a strategic plan of some sort, not just like what's going to happen next year, but what's going to happen over the next 5 years. And that part of finance, is that kind of strategy and planning part, really depends on that. And a lot of that is doing research, not just about kind of pure finance stuff, not just looking at the company's internal numbers, but just being smart about the world in general to help make those plans kind of do better stuff. And then the last kind of function I'd say that if you're in finance in a big company, you do is sort of what I'd call deal making and transactional finance. Every company does business with other companies, with other individuals, and all that. And so there's always deals kind of going on. Whether that's a deal for you buying something, whether it's a deal for your company selling something, whether it's buying and selling and merging with other companies, doing strategic partnerships, all that kind of stuff. All those deals involve numbers. All those deals involve some benefit and cost. And all those deals have to get negotiated one way or another. And there's definitely some finance people that that's what they embrace, and that's what they're kind of really good at. They like doing those deals. They like doing that kind of operational, very real stuff, using that whole toolkit of what finance has to then kick out some stuff. So anyhow, so those are the three main buckets of what people do. It's interesting in that I don't think anyone like in high school would say, oh, I want to go do deals at a big company. And that's probably the most tangible of the three jobs. I mean, certainly no one's going to say, oh, I want to do Excel spreadsheets all day and do big, planning models and 3-year forecasts and that sort of thing. But, in your career, you kind of find your way into one of them or the other and find that you're good at them or not, or that the company has a need for it or not. And you basically go from there. One of the best things about working in finance is, again, you get to impact the most important decisions in a company. When everything's kind of going right, when you're actually doing good things, you're getting to do that. So that means that you feel like your work is meaningful because, again, you're working on kind of hard, important, problems. You're getting to help make everybody else better in their job because you're making them smarter about, the fundamental economics of what they're doing, about what resources they're using, about what revenue they're getting, whatever there is on that. And the other, fun thing about finance is that you end up with a lot of access, right? I mean, you kind of have the keys to the kingdom in terms of data. You're often, sitting in the important meetings and, and being a fly on the wall, if not a direct speaker on those kind of things. And, if that kind of thing is exciting, right? If you want to be, in those rooms where the decision was made kind of stuff, finance is a way to get there. Then in some ways is easier than some other paths because, you're there, again, to help everybody else make the decision better. But there's always something new to be discovered. I mean, I'd say, even the kind of backwards-looking stuff that is in theory the most cut and dried, and there's enough standard templates and metrics and all that kind of stuff where you're kind of just turning the crank. There's always new things that come out that you then have to figure out. There's always some new element of your business that you need to figure out a new way to measure, or there's some new trend in your business that you need to figure out some new way to measure. So, you're constantly having to kind of reinvent and constantly having to figure out new stuff. And that's cool. And it's also just inherently a data intensive business. So you're constantly just having to learn both about your company through both formal stuff, like just learning reports, learning data sources, all that kind of stuff. Also just through talking to people, right? I mean, a lot of what you're going to do is taking theories that people can articulate and then trying to use data to kind of play that out one way or the other. So getting to learn that way is cool. And you just have to be smart about the world, right? I mean, there's always kind of trends changing. So you can't just kind of live in a little bubble and kind of do your thing really well and ignore the rest of the world. You have to know your industry. You have to know, financial markets to some extent. You have to, know rules and regulations changes. You have to know technology changes. So all that is what gets me excited. The fact that you can never just kind of like sit and be good at it and not have to worry about it. You always have to kind of be challenging yourself internally, externally, tools to get better. I think there's multiple elements to stress in finance, and there's also like a spectrum of how stressful finance jobs are. I mean, like investment banking at the very, very high level of stress because of the nature of what that is when you're having to do stuff very, very quickly, and then corporate finance is a lot less stressful than that, but still absolutely has its stressful moments and all that. So I think, one thing I think that's tough is that you are dependent on other people for a lot of things. Like you need people, to do your job well, you need people to give you data, to give you insights, to do all that kind of stuff. And, if you can't build those right relationships to have those people trust you and be good partners with you, then you're kind of fried. Right? And so that can be stressful, right? If you just, aren't doing your job because of dependencies on other people. Another one that's stressful about finance is there's almost always deadlines involved, and the deadlines are almost always too short one way or another. You always wish you had more time to do something than what you had. But, especially like in kind of public company, kind of finance, like when you have that earnings date set and the numbers got to be ready for that, or when you have a board meeting and the numbers got to be ready for that, sometimes things are really hard, or sometimes you're launching a game on the 15th of the month, and then you have to do a whole new budget by the 20th of the month, right? That's just bad luck in terms of timing, but that happens, and you have to be ready for it, and you have to kind of prep for it, and you have to be willing to, work those long, unpredictable hours sometimes, and also to work, still, work well, work very high quality, don't make mistakes, even when you have, a third as much time to do something as what you think you have, and that kind of thing. So I think, those are, two of the things on a day-to-day basis. I'd say that, the other one that is just no fun when it does happen is that, sometimes companies do miscalibrate on resources, or sometimes you try something and it doesn't work out and you got to cut. And that is never fun. It's, and almost, finance is always involved in those kind of processes to try to okay, we got to take $50 million out of the company. How are we going to find that $50 million? And, inevitably, it involves jobs of people who are your colleagues, your friends, who you respect, and all that kind of stuff. But sometimes you can't avoid that. So that, any kind of executive management, when you're in that mode, it's not fun. I think finance in particular gets caught up in that just because you have to be unemotional about it. You have to be objective about it. You have to roll together those numbers and be part of the process that way. It's been a little while since I've hired a junior level kind of finance person. But in general, because, like I've said, so much of it is not about kind of specific skills or experience or that kind of stuff. A lot of it's looking for attitude and aptitude. So the attitude, is this kind of level of intellectual curiosity and just kind of wanting to solve stuff and kind of being excited about the nature of the work and the specific kind of task there and that kind of thing. Often that junior level role is going to be like a cost analyst or something like that, which is not a very, very exciting job. So they're not necessarily going to be excited about the cost analysis part, but maybe there's some other angle that they're excited about that'll kind of, carry them through the hard times. What makes the best finance people sort of an interesting question, because I think there's very different elements to that. I mean, I think there are some very, very successful finance leaders who are kind of the stereotypical finance leader of just being very super detail oriented and super micromanaging and super kind of focused on the details and they succeed that way. And like for some companies that actually is the right answer. Like some companies, like say you're a grocery store chain and you have razor thin, kind of margins on what your profits are. Okay, it is about being detailed. It is about squeezing every little bit of optimization kind of out of everywhere. And there are those kind of opportunities. I think in video game finance, the right personality type is sort of that. It's kind of a combination of both being very flexible in terms of understanding what the important things and decisions are at the time and pivoting to those at that time, rather than just like, oh, I'm always going to go to the accounting because the accounting is what I'm comfortable with and that's what matters and that kind of thing. So I think finance, in video game companies has something like that. And I think in some companies, like, what it takes to be really successful is to be like just a hyper creative, CFO. Like if you're a company who's mostly about doing deals, then you have to be super creative in terms of realizing what deal opportunities might be there, what deal structures might be, how those kind of pieces go together and that sort of thing. And that's very, very different, again, than the grocery store, sort of CFO and sort of going from there. So there's a lot of different answers there. All of them involve math. So, in general, I would say it's not terribly competitive, right? Because all companies, kind of have needs for kind of people like this, and there always are going to be the junior level roles that need to be filled, and kind of going from there. The key thing in terms of actually, finding that first finance job is to be relatively open-minded, about it. Again, there's your dream industry, there's your dream specific job and kind of what you'd be doing. And I think in both cases, you have to be relatively flexible. I mean, no one is going to get, there aren't that many video game entry-level finance jobs. And so that's just a narrow aperture to it. That plus the notion of, and I want to work on monetization for World of Warcraft, and that's what I want my first job to be. Almost no chance, that something that specific you'll be able to land. So I think you both have to be open-minded about industries, and across every industry, right? There's great companies and there's not so great companies, but you're going to learn kind of no matter where you are. So being, don't box yourself in terms of that. Obviously, it's more useful to work for like a software company if you want to get into video games than to work for a, pine tar company. But but still, again, you'll learn it, and you'll learn something kind of everywhere. The second element is to be open-minded about what that first job is. Entry-level jobs in an industry, they're not the best jobs, right? They're generally grunty and grindy and all those kind of things. That's certainly true with finance, right? You're not going to be putting together the master plan for the next 5 years for the company in your very first job. You're going to be, rolling together numbers and a budget for some tiny little cost center, and things like that. So I think that's the second part, just to kind of be, again, open-minded. In a lot of cases, being associated with a great team, no matter what the job is maybe more important than what seems on paper like a great job, but with a team that's maybe a little bit scarier or a little bit less of a good fit for you and sort of stuff like that. So I think, the most important thing is make sure it's a job that you like well enough to be successful in it, and you don't just completely hate from the get-go. Because if you love your job enough, or you care, or don't hate your job enough at least, that's how you'll start to be successful. And, getting that momentum going in your career out of that first job is really the most important thing. It's not get these 5 skills, do these 5 things. My 18-year-old self had no idea I'd be doing this job and had no idea that this job existed, and so, there's definitely a big gap, in terms of that. But at the same time, like, I don't know how to close that gap exactly. There's so much to just learn about how business goes in general. And finance jobs are a part of that. But, there's so many different ways to get to the same place. Maybe that's sort of the biggest lesson sort of overall. So many careers, because I'd say, because education is so programmed these days, like it's almost like you got to start in late elementary school planning out your college applications at this point. And that's that's ugly, right? And it's so programmed, and it's so, here's the way, here's the path, blah blah blah. All that breaks up a lot more for finance jobs and later on in career stuff. So I think probably back when I was 18, I would have thought a lot of this stuff is a lot more linear, and there is one way to kind of get there, and every choice is like a hugely importful thing, and I either go right or go left, and if I make the wrong choice, I can never go back. Totally not true. Totally 100% not true on all this kind of stuff. And so it kind of takes some of the pressure off of some of the decisions that anyone is trying to make when they're 18, and trying to plan out your life when you don't even know what your options really are. The finance jobs are ones that'll always be there waiting for you.